Hey, it's Renee with Reset with Renee. Welcome back. Thanks for joining me live or later. I don't have clients today, so I've had time to reflect. And I believe in the synchronicity of the universe when it sends you messages. You know, once I listen, second, I'm like, you have my attention. Third time, I'm like, all right, what is here? And so there's just been an intersection of themes from my own personal life and then the work that I see my clients doing. So one of the things I'm personally working on right now is revisiting relationships that had unresolved endings or poor endings. And so that's been on my mind and heart this week. And then in talking with clients, there's been a lot of conversation about like breakups, poor endings in relationships, aging parents, and several people I've talked to in my professional context and personally are losing people that they love from cancer and other issues. So it's like kind of a heavy topic, I guess, today about grief and loss and death. But really where I started in my reflection is how hard it is to let go sometimes. Like, I don't think that many of us have learned how to let go with love and with grace. And so that's what I wanted to talk about with you all today, whoever's listening. And so one of the first notes I have here is coming from time I spent in 12-step programs. As a teenager, I started going to 12-step programs. I had family members who were alcoholics. And in those programs, they talk about the concept of detachment with love. And I struggled with that even as an adult. And so, you know, I could like love and I could detach, but kind of combining the two has always been a little bit tricky. Because when you're in a relationship with someone who's engaging in hurtful or harmful behavior, it's natural and human to kind of get your protection up. And then it's really hard to know what the balance is. So where I've landed with that, and I want to share this with you, to me, detachment with love, if I had to break it down into equation, would be radical love, like for yourself, for the other person, plus boundaries and standards. So really getting clear about, I'm going to say, your personal power, so that you're not, I don't want you to set boundaries from a place of disempowerment, because then when you lead with the boundaries, you speak or you act them out, it's going to come from a protective place, and the energetics of that does not convey well. So even if your boundary is good and communicated fairly well, if the energy isn't a match and isn't in alignment, the other person is going to pick that up consciously or unconsciously. So I think that's something to lean into if you struggle with boundaries, maintaining those, or you have really just tricky people in your life who you care about or you have to be in relationship with, and how to navigate that in a clean and pure way where you're protecting yourself, but you're not armored up and reactive and disempowered. So there's that. And then on grief, man, I listened to a podcast today. I've been listening to it the last couple of days whenever I get a chance. It was Mark Grove's podcast, and he interviewed an author. And she was talking about her grief journey after her husband died. So I listened to that. I've done a lot of listening the last couple of years on the topic of grief, because I don't think that we are taught how to do it well. We're not taught how to do death. We're not taught how to do grief. And even as a mental health provider and being in the healing arts space, that's something that I don't think there's a lot of education about. That's something you come into learning more about as you mature and develop personally and professionally. So my heart really goes out to some of the people that are in my world who are in that place of anticipatory grief with the endings of relationships, impending deaths that are coming, and just the not knowing how to handle that. I posted on Instagram, I think earlier, social media sometime this week, about when I was in IPI in my psychedelic assisted therapy training program, we had at least an hour on dying and death and dying and how psychedelics can enter into that space. It's a whole topic for another day. But the presenter shared a couple of different things about how to best support someone who's going through a death process, or the loved ones. And so I think this is important. If you know someone who is getting ready to make that transition, there are 5 things that you can communicate to them that can be helpful. And so those 5 things are: 1 is, I love you. 2 is, thank you for. So whatever you have appreciation and gratitude for about them or your connection. 3, it's okay for you to go. 4, we're going to be okay. And 5, and we're going to look after each other. And then the optional add-on would be, I'm sorry that. So it could be something that you want to apologize for, or ask forgiveness for, or you're sorry that you see their needs haven't been met, or they're struggling, whatever you have that compassion for. So I think that could be really profound to have that level of information should you need it. Okay, and then connected to that, like loss and breakups. So one of the things I recommended to a client this week, they're going through a breakup, and I said, write a letter. Don't send it, just write a letter, journal basically, to help you process what's going on in your mind, heart, spirit. And it can help to note like what you're grateful for and what you're appreciative of about that connection and the relationship and time together. And then also note any regrets. And so as you go through that writing process and that reflection process, go back through and then sort of look for the distilled wisdom. What did you learn from that relationship? What are you learning from this process of the breakup? What's next for you? And so that's one of the like silver linings of grief that I have found is it's an opening. First, it brings you to your knees. And if you can stay with it, if you have the capacity to feel it and learn from it, it allows a portal to a next level of something. It could be the next level relationship. It can be the next level of your personal growth. It can just be a big opening for you. And I don't think that gets talked about either. So I wanted to mention that. And then the other thing about grief, and this is what I heard in the podcast, the Mark Rose podcast that I was listening to, the author, really what is true is that people can only really grieve when they're resourced enough internally and externally, when they have enough capacity. So some of my relationships and losses in life, like I could grieve in the moment because I had support and capacity, and others I had to contain, and then some of them I had to bury because it just wasn't safe enough or appropriate enough time, place, or resourced enough to do it. So that's something to keep in mind. Something I said to a client the other day was like, hey, if you need to schedule time just for me to hold space and for you to have a release and to cry, like we can do that. And so when you're with someone who is going through loss, the tendency is for us to try to problem solve and soothe, and that's okay, but oftentimes people need you to hold space. And so that was talked about in the podcast I listened to earlier. Like the woman said, having 3 or 4 people in my living room who already knew everything, like all the words had been said, and they just sat quietly while I cried. And so that's the thing about grief, is often if you can be with it, at first it takes you out and under. If someone or something was important to you, and then over time that becomes, the wave of grief becomes shorter and less intense, and something that you can experience and then move on. And that's something that she said that I resonated with. Like grief can like take you out a couple days at first, or weeks or months or longer, and then the more comfortable you get, the easier the wave is to ride. So there's that cliche, time heals all wounds, and I'm kind of don't buy that 100%. I think time heals wounds if you're doing things to help heal the wound other than ignoring it, avoiding it, stuffing it, or numbing it, which is what we do in our culture. What else did I want to say? Oh, and then the other thing she mentioned that I loved because it was simple, easy to remember. She talked about what helped her during her grief and then also just in life. So I think, PSA, I think everyone needs to have practices, daily practices that help them ground, get connected to their center, get connected to their spirit, get connected to their greater consciousness, whether you call that God, Holy Spirit, universe, whatever. Those practices are important for the good days and they're really helpful for the bad days. So 3 that she mentioned, she called it the 3 M's. I loved that. It was meditation, music, and movement. Meditation can be tricky, especially for folks. I specialize in CPTSD, so when a person has a lifetime, years or decades of stuffing, numbing, avoiding, it's really hard for them then to start to be with. It can be very overwhelming. So you got to titrate that, and that's something that I talk about with my clients. The other thing is music. Music in and of itself is a healing component. And some of my clients, and myself included, I work with a lot of folks that are, you could say, highly sensitive, very emotionally attuned. And so folks like that need a release. They need to feel things. And so music, movies, things that evoke those feelings that are maybe underneath the surface, that's a good tool to feel and release. And then movement, that's the other thing that she mentioned, and I agree. I mean, meditation can look so I'm going back to that can look so different. It can be really just getting quiet, sitting, standing, doing whatever, walking. You don't have to look like Zen Buddhist to meditate. You can do a walking meditation. You can do it while you're doing dishes or laundry. It's just like really connecting inside and listening inside. So I encourage you to, if meditation's hard for you, to expand the concept of what meditation could be for you. Sometimes journaling is a tool for that. So, meditation, music, and movement. And all of those things speak to me personally. They've been really helpful in my own healing and recovery journey. And I credit those things actually to helping me be ready to do ketamine when I did that back in December in Boulder as part of my training. You know, when I came out of that and processed that, I'm like, because I had practices that connected me to myself and kept me grounded, and it's something I can return to as a resource, I wasn't blown away. And that's by the ketamine experience. And there are people who have concerns about that if people haven't done enough work to prepare for those sorts of experiences, and to be really intentional about going in and then coming out, reflecting and integrating. So I think psychedelic assisted therapy can be a good, helpful bridge for people at times, and it can help level up any healing that you want to do. But I do think preparation is important as well as integration. So I'm just taking a look at my notes to see if I missed anything. Yes, so I mentioned the whole ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics, 12 steps. That's where that DETACH with Love concept came from. But folks who have had, adults who have had a parent with addiction, mental illness, multiple addictions, if there's been emotional neglect or abuse or just a combination, that's how you get CPTSD. They typically really struggle with letting go because their family environment has really helped them to get good at waiting and hoping, plus seeing the good in people and accepting the bad, because that's what you got to do as a child in a dysfunctional family. Hope for the best, hope someone gets better, love them anyway despite their choices. And so when you get into adulthood and then you have more loss, or you have breakups, or a relationship you need to let go of, or you face death, that can be really difficult. So folks with CPTSD, sort of, I'm going to say issues, they have wounds, really hardcore, deep wounds around abandonment, betrayal, shock, rejection, and any loss is going to trigger that. And it can be hard then for them to let go, because they also have parts of them that are longing and parts of them that are hoping and waiting. And so kind of assessing and figuring out what parts are driving decisions and relationships and how that factors into grieving can be a significant piece of work for folks who are recovering from CPTSD. So, heavy topic for pre-holiday weekend, but that has been the theme of the week. Endings, and how can you do those consciously? How can you do those with love? And how can you let go when you need to let go? So if you have comments, let me know. Questions, let me know. Reach out if you like a reset. And if I don't hear from you, I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Thanks for listening.